Hey guys, it's Selwen here, now talking about Elemental Shaman. And Elemental is one of those specs that went under the knife and it suffered the simplification treatment, making it play super slow in comparison to Legion. I'll explain all of that in a minute. First of all, I just wanted to say that I do enjoy Elemental. I think it can be a pretty fun class, especially in dungeons, and in Legion it wasn't all that bad. It could be pretty fun with some Legos and tier sets that could lead to the Gambler build, which is very RNG based, and that combined with your AoE galore and your artifact ability made it rather fun. But taking that aside, Elemental is that sort of spec that you can get great satisfaction even if the gameplay is rather simple. The spells look and sound amazing, they really have that meaty, impactful feel to them. Couple that with your mastery that creates duplicates and your love for critting that you even get a passive to get bigger ones can make Elemental really fun in that bursty sort of way. Now, as it stands, that still exists, although it feels sluggish, stale, and just overall slow, which kinda goes against what Elemental is supposed to be, even though you do still hit pretty hard. But I hope that changes, and with gear things might improve, but to explain myself better, let's first take a look at your main abilities. As for your artifact stuff, by the way, they are all pretty much gone, besides your ability, which is now a talent, although weaker, no longer increases the damage by 200% and only affects 2 spells, however it always triggers Elemental Overload. So first on here you get your Earth Elemental, which has stayed the same. I just wanted to show off the new model, which looks so cool, and it's quite interesting as it's far from a DPS cooldown, but I do have an Azeroth trait that transforms it into one, although it's quite awkward when it aggroes from the tank, but got to get that deeps, I guess. Next we have our Earth Shock. Now a lot of our abilities became simpler, or I guess I should say straightforward if I want to be nicer. So in Legion, Earth Shock was your big hitter and your main way to spend Maelstrom in single target. So you would build it and then dump it here on this huge hit. Now there it could be used between 10 to 100 Maelstrom, and there was this sort of sweet spot that you wanted to use them, especially with that Gambler style of play, but it was still something for you to somewhat manage, and you had a big window to use it from. In my opinion, it made Earth Shock not only more unique and added some depth to it, but also gave you a choice to when you wanted to use it. Now it's just a blunt 60 Maelstrom cost, and that's it, which makes it a bit boring. Not only that, not having a set amount of Maelstrom meant that we could use Earth Shock on the move, even if we were not at the perfect amount to use it. As long as we were close, we could use it, and in turn it helped our mobility. In general, just feels less interesting, but still hits as hard as ever, just take in mind the number squish. Then you get your Capacitor Totem. This was your Lightning Surge Totem, and it was made baseline, which is great, but that's what happened to all classes anyway in BFA, just giving away what was a sure pick in your talents, and just make it baseline. Echo of the Elements. What? And I almost missed it, but you do get Chain Lightning back here, still hitting 5 targets, but now only generating 3 Maelstrom per target hit, down from 6 from Legion. Now I wanted to address the other big main problem in Elemental right now, which is Maelstrom generation. Without taking specific talents, it just feels slow, especially in AoE. Now, you get this passive here called Fulmination that just states that Lightning Bolt grants 6 Maelstrom, down from 8, Lava Burst 8, down from 12, and Chain Lightning, those 3. So big nerfs to your Maelstrom generation overall. But in AoE, so going back to Chain Lightning, it just feels super slow at times. In Legion, I was used to getting 1 or 2 Chain Lightnings and you could go for an Earthquake. It felt fast, reactive, and kept you engaged. Here, unless I took specific talents, just made me starve for Maelstrom to put those Earthquakes out. Not only that, the cost of Earthquake was increased from 50 to 75, so not only are you generating less, you need more for Earthquakes. Needless to say, you can clearly see why it feels slow. Now again, talents help here, specifically the new high voltage, but talents should enhance a spec. It should not be used as a way to actually fix how it plays, and that's exactly how some talents are feeling right now. Echo of the elements. Now, earthquakes on themselves still do decent damage, but just are less frequent, which then creates another issue, as they are less frequent, and if things like mobs moving away from it because your tank was a dick and just simply moved them, or that was simply what needed to be done, you're gonna suffer a lot because of it, because that earthquake took a lot of you to just put out. In Legion wasn't a big deal, as you could put them out rather easily. Here, not so much. So you're just getting a lot less for more, which doesn't make a lot of sense. As for your lava burst, it's overall weaker also, simply because it generates less maelstrom, so 8 down from 12. The big change here is the fact that it no longer requires flame shock up, which is long overdue, and is gonna make target switching overall better without punishing you in any way. But the main reason for this is the other simplification and change on Flame Shock, as now it doesn't use Maelstrom and it's just a dot that you keep up. No duration to manage or anything, just a dot and you keep it up because it gives you those Lava Surge procs for an instant Lava Burst, which as always keeps you more engaged, adds that unpredictability to the spec to keep that flow going. You still have the issue of getting a proc and with only one charge of lava bursts makes it quite annoying to maximize. If only there was a way to improve this. If only. So Flame Shock just has one main issue right now, is that to compensate for the lack of Maelstrom cost, they added a cooldown, which is fair enough, but also means that multi-dotting now both in dungeons or cleaving fights is quite difficult and annoying. Overall, these changes has made Elemental easier to play, even more so, and more straightforward, if you will. In a way, it's nice, but at the same time, did we really needed this? I'll leave that question up to you guys. As for your Fire Elemental, did suffer some changes. The cooldown was reduced from 5 minutes to 2.5 minutes, which was kinda what you did anyway with the trait from Lava Burst that reduced the cooldown, and now it generates a 3 Maelstrom on top of the damage, each time the Flame Shock ticks. Now, it helps, especially on your open earth, for you to get more earth shocks out, but it's not a huge difference to your gameplay. It's not gonna change your rotation or your thought process. It's still mostly a fire and forget cooldown. Yes, pun intended. I hate myself. The highlight is for sure the new model, which looks beautiful. Even gets these heat waves on there, really freaking good looking. Again, Elemental pulling them aesthetics. As for Frost Shocks, like the fire one, it suffered the same change. It's now free of cost while dealing pretty decent damage and adds that 50% slow. Now, I can see this changing in the future because right now this ability fills in the gap during movements, as you can basically spam it and the damage of it is only about 20% less than a lightning bolt. So even though it feels really weird, makes mobility not as an hassle anymore. Although I'm not really seeing it staying this way, I expect some nerfs and just baked it in the way it works now onto the Ice Fury talent, which as you can imagine the no Maelstrom costs makes it far more usable now. As for Lightning Bolt, it still is your filler and pretty much the same, just generates less Maelstrom, but you do have a lot of talents now focused around Lightning Bolt, so there. And then you get your Tremor Totem back for more utility, staying for 1 second on 1 minute cooldown, and it will remove any sleep, charm or fear effects from any raid or group member within 30 yards, which is really cool. Also, by the way, any ability that I didn't mention is just because they are the same as in Legion in order to save some time. As for passives, I mostly covered them, but you still get your Elemental Fury for those bigger crits, Fulmination, like I said before, Lava Surge, and then you get your Mastery, which is mostly the same, although the extra Maelstrom generated isn't stated, just says less, should still be 75% though. Overall, what all those changes mean is that your gameplay feels overall slower than in Legion, both in single targets and AoE. I'm sure that with gear or even Azerite traits can help here, but yeah, really quite sluggish and very stale with all those simplifications that I just talked about earlier. Now that said, let's talk talents, and can Elemental be redeemed here? And the answer is yes and no, because right now there's a few talents that feels like a must to fix those previous issues, which is rather sad, so let's just talk about them. So on the first tier I got a mini, let's just say Earth Attack or Stroke, I don't even know, because I saw Echo of the Elements and Elemental Blast in the same tier. Yeah, I know. Okay, but Echo of the Elements, as most of you might know, should be baseline at this point. And why? Well, Echo of the Elements grants a secondary charge to your Lava Burst. Now, that on itself overall means more damage on Lava Burst and more Maelstrom. But taking that aside, that direct action, it actually makes your rotation more engaging and allows your proc play to feel more fluid. As with the two charges, you gain the option to gain a proc, while at the same time keep Lava Burst on cooldown. In turn, if you play properly, you will be able to maximize Lava Burst's uses. Without the talents, that's practically impossible, as each proc is gonna reset the cooldown entirely instead of just granting a charge. On that alone makes Echo of the Elements always feel a must. But now even more so because your generation of Maelstrom is quite poor, so this will help a bit. What doesn't make sense, however, is how Elemental Blast is also here, as is an ability that hits a bit less than Lava Burst, but grants buffs like higher haste or crit or mastery as random. But if it procs an overload, you will be able to get 2 buffs. Now, in a way, is granting higher Maelstrom as well, if you get the Mastery buff, although that's random and then you get the randomness on the Mastery effect on itself. The others are obviously great benefits as well. Doing things faster helps with everything, so with the haste, and doing crits is how you get most of your damage. But Elemental Blast was also one of those talents that was set and forget in Legion, as it felt like a must, as was Echo of the Elements. The only reason you should want to switch them was the influence tier sets had on your playstyle. So now you have to choose what it feels like a must-have talents to make your rotation more fluid, interesting, and engaging. And this just feels like an awful choice to make, and no tier should feel like that. And you also get something new here called Exposed Elements, and it's alright. When you Earth Shock a target, it will leave a debuff on that same target to increase the damage of your next Lightning Bolt by 100%. So this is just going to increase the damage of your filler, and there's actually good synergy to be had with these talents, as there's quite a lot more talents focused around Lightning Bolt, and that improved one can hit harder than a Lava Burst. But again, you never really want to take it, as Echo of the Elements feels like a must. See the problem here? Now, Aftershock makes a return, but has been changed. In Legion was a partial refund on your Maelstrom costing abilities, and happened always, and was what made your Gambler build work, together with your Legos. But now this ability kind of functions like your legendary boots that had a 20% chance to make your Earth Shock refund all Maelstrom used. So that refund on top of the refunds from the talents, there were times that using an Earth Shock actually granted extra Maelstrom, which then you could follow with another Earth Shock. Not only that, they could feed off each other, and that coupled with your glove Legos that granted ascendance on proc depending on Maelstrom used, essentially they created the Gambler build, right? Where you just spend a lot of Maelstrom and you are gambling with RNG to spend even more Maelstrom to proc that ascendance and just use a lot of Earth Shocks. That was a fast explanation to what Gambler was. So now Aftershock kinda works like that, but remember, Earth Shock is now on a flat 60 Maelstrom cost, and your cap is 100. So imagine using your Lego boots without the gloves, and without Aftershock. That's what it is. And generally, it kind of works in some situations, especially if you mix exposed elements, so you get more of those improved lightning bolts. But there's some issues with it, primarily on Maelstrom. As for an example, if you are pulling in Maelstrom, so you are closing in on your cap before you use Earthshock because you are saving it for movement or a priority target, something like that. Because that's just something that you want to do at times, and it procs an Aftershock. And at the same time, you either get a Lava Burst proc, or you want to follow with a Lightning Bolt if you're using exposed elements. You then get this really awful decision to make, that you either overcap Maelstrom, or sacrifice a proc and /or exposed elements. It's not always that it happens, it's quite rare, but it can. With a Gambler build and the way Earthshock worked in Legion, you would specifically use it not high on Maelstrom to specifically avoid that. Something that I believe I explained on my guide. It can also work with Earthquake, which sometimes it's great as they feel slower. So there are times that you can get 2 straight off. That said, you will be putting part of your AoE damage on RNG, and that isn't good. Then you get Master of the Elements, which is another talent that does have some issues. Every time you use Lava Burst, you gain a buff to increase the damage of your next Nature or Frost ability. So it's just another flat damage increase. Now, there is some planning with this, as you can try and make your Earthshock benefit from it. Most of the time though, Lightning Bolt will be the one to consume it, which doesn't feel all that worth, but Echo of the Elements also synergizes pretty well here, as you simply gonna get more buffs as you get more Lava Bursts to use. And now that said, it can also create weird decisions, as now you always want to weave in a different ability in between your Lava Bursts. Earthshock is not always gonna be available, so it can be hard to time it right. Kinda in the hands of RNG to get a proc before you gonna use a Earthshock. But for example, while you are casting a Lava Burst and you get a Lava Burst proc midway, the natural way to react to that would be to send to Lava Bursts, right? And that's a pretty cool feeling. Well, with this talent, you kinda don't want to do that because you need to weave in a different ability. So you either lose the damage bonus or you let your proc just stay there, which you also don't want to do. So again, it doesn't feel good. But also synergizes really well with Ice Fury, which since also benefits frost damage, but more on that in a bit. Then you get your totems, which is the safest pick. You get Maelstrom every second to help on how slow it feels now, a higher chance on overloads on bolts and chain lightnings, helping with Maelstrom as well, and in AoE. And the other 2 buffs are always welcomed as well, especially since Flame Shock hits pretty decently now, and the haste is always good. Next tier, you get your Gust of Winds. I'm joking. Yeah. So replacing it, we now get Spirit Wolf, while in Ghost Wolf form you gain 5% more movement speed and damage reduction, stacking 4 times. Yeah. Then you also have Earth Shield, which will help a bit of your squishiness, which is still very present here, as it gives you a heal anytime you get hit and increases the healing done by 10%. So it can also serve as utility, as you can place it on a tank. Just a bit odd seeing it here, but hey. Then you get your Static Charge to decrease the cooldown of your stun totem by 5 seconds up to 20 seconds per target hit. Now, High Voltage. There's been a bug with it, like it doesn't always do what it's supposed to do, but your Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning can now trigger a second Elemental Overload. Seems weaker than the normal one, but in general will provide a bit more damage in single target and multi-targets, and Maelstrom. Not much, but still some, and you really need that extra Maelstrom. So because of that, it really feels like a must in AoE, another set and forget talent. As now your Chain Lightning won't feel as slow anymore. It's more RNG, but when it procs, you will get about the same Maelstrom as you get in Legion, so it does make your AoE more fluid and feel better. Combine this with Stormkeeper and it will basically cap your Maelstrom to get out those earthquakes easier, even though you will only be able to put out 1. Still not as good as it should be, but more manageable. Problem now is that it made Liquid Magma Totem totally useless. It already had some problems in dungeons. The cooldown made it rather difficult to use in all trash packs. Now it was completely wrecked, as you really need high voltage to make your AoE actually function, which is sad because Liquid Magma Totem looks really quite cool. As for your Storm Elemental, is mainly a single target cooldown, although it has an AoE component. It will replace your Fire Elemental, but instead of granting Maelstrom, which is what Fire Elemental does now, it will increase Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning cast time every time you use one. So again, it's alright, it still is Fire and Forget, and you kinda want to combo with other haste-like buffs like Bloodlust or this later talent. It also benefits Chain Lightning, but the cooldown alone makes it not appealing for dungeons, so it's practically non-existent. Next tier we have Nature's Guardian back. When your health is brought below 35% HP, you are healed by 20% of your maximum health. Cannot occur every 45 seconds, so once again can help with your squishiness a little bit anyway. Ancestral Guidance, still here as a cooldown, transferring 25% of your damage to heal 3 targets, but now is on the global cooldown. Yeah, I can just see people not taking this on the simple fact that it is on the global cooldown. I mean, just taking away my precious global cooldown to heal people? Hell no. Yeah, I can see that. Windrush Totem, still here then for mobility for the entire group with that sprint buff, which is so good. Then you get your Earth and Rage. It's a passive. As you deal damage, you have a chance to incite the earth around you to basically impale mobs. Now it looks quite cool, but yeah, it's a boring passive with pretty low damage. Primal Elementus empowers your pets and seems to be the most powerful choice right now, but take in mind that this is beta and numbers might change, but now actually provides pretty good buffs. So on the Earth Elemental, which was just a tanky pet, it now gives a 4-second stun and a 40% damage reduction buff to both you and your pet. That's actually quite a big deal. And with this talent you can also take out the taunts, so you'll be able to use this freely just for the damage reduction, or if you have the Azeroth trait like I do, you can use it as a DPS cooldown. Your Fire one gains a single target dot and a Meteor ability that can serve as this big AoE. As for your Storm one, if you talented it, also gives sort of the same Eye of the Storm ability, a channel like AoE, which looks really cool and then just gets more powerful. And then other abilities is just for single targets that is just gonna cast. So in a way it can be used for burst AoE or just to increase their potential in single targets. So if you don't want Ice Fury or a boring passive, well, Elemental pet class confirmed. And speaking of which, you then get Ice Fury, generating 15 Maelstrom now, and then grants a buff empowering your next 4 Frost Shocks, dealing 60% more damage. So kinda like it was in Legion, however Frost Shock is free, so now makes the Wind Fury playstyle much more manageable. You still have quite a lot of buttons to click, but still more playable than before. I'm personally not a fan of it, and not a lot of Shamans are, but can also combine really well with Master of the Elements and Echo of the Elements, as then you can start within a Lava Burst and then Frost Shock, a Lava Burst and Frost Shock whenever you can, to transform that 60% damage increase to 80% damage increase. But again, Master of the Elements has some issues. As for Ice Fury, there is some tiers where it doesn't really have a synergy, like for example this tier here, you get high voltage, it's not gonna benefit it much. Storm Elemental, not either, because you're gonna be focusing on lightning bolts. So if you get Ice Fury off cooldown, you're gonna be casting that, you're gonna be casting Lava Burst, and you're gonna be casting Frost Shocks, and then the cooldown is worthless. So again, it does have issues with synergy, but it does make you quite mobile. And final tier, you get your Storm Keeper, which I kinda went through already. Single target wise, right now isn't all that great. Might give a bit extra Maelstrom, but no longer increases the damage, so unless you combo with Exposed Elements, is mainly an AoE choice for bursty damage. Couple it up with high voltage, and like I said, it's gonna give you loads of Maelstrom to spend. Well, in one earthquake. Ascendance is also still here, and still doing exactly the same, although on the global cooldown. Yeah, but you know what it does. It just allows you to spam Lava Burst, but you're not gonna get anywhere near as much Maelstrom like you did in Legion. but for the most part it still works the same. The only issue I have with Ascendance is with the new Master of the Elements, which you kinda want to use, but at the same time, one ability is telling you to spam Lava Burst, while Master of the Elements is telling you to weave in an ability in between your Lava Bursts. Kinda weird, isn't it? And then you get the new Unlimited Power. I just couldn't resist. And it's completely passive, which is alright, I guess. Every time you get an elemental overload, you get 2% haste, and the buff stacks, but cannot refresh. It stays for 10 seconds. So it combos nicely with Bloodlust or Storm Elemental Pets. But overall, with low gear, you're never gonna get the buff stack high. As you get more, some more haste, some more mastery to make all of that proc, I'm sensing that will get pretty good, but does help with Maelstrom generation both in single target and AoE, as you generally do things faster on this sort of periodically phases, so yes, it will help there a bit. Combine this with Totem Mastery and High Voltage, it can make your AoE overall better, as High Voltage can stack it twice if it procs, and Totem Mastery just synergizes as well. The same follows for single target, but not as prominent. Gameplay wise and mechanically, you know, it's a passive buff that you can't do much about. So guys, that covers it all. And the new Elemental Shaman, like I said previously, just feels slow, stale, with not much going for it. The talents does make it somewhat more playable, but with choices that feels like a must, forcing you on this path to make the gameplay actually enjoyable, at least a little bit more enjoyable. And that's not how it should be at all. It should be about choices. I mean, it's fine for a simple spec if you're into that. I'm all in for simple specs, but what we have here, it just needs some changes. We need to get Echo of the Elements baseline. The BMs got a similar treatment, so why can't we? Our AoE needs improvements, and our talent tree still needs some work, and the forums are full of great feedback. That said, I was still able to take some enjoyment out of Elemental. Not gameplay wise per se, but just how it looks and how it feels. No matter how slow it is, it's still fun blasting mobs with lightning, sending lava bursts and summoning elementals now with these badass new models, and just seeing all those crits and big numbers with the shocks and the duplicates and all of that. And then you still get Stormkeeper, which is just a G's fest, but yeah, besides that, it needs some work. Anyway guys, do let me know what you all think of BFA's Elemental, make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon to get more beta videos, and check out my Patreon if you wish to support this channel. As always, thank you for watching, have a fantastic day everyone, and I'll see you all next time. See ya!